Let's get started. My name is Raul Medina, and I am a shop steward from Chicago Local 705 and a member of the TDU Steering Committee. Today's call is sponsored by UPS Teamsters United, which is a project of the Teamsters for a Democratic Union. We are a network of Teamsters who inform and involve members to build a strong union. I'd like to introduce Beth Breslaw, TDU organizer, who is going to kick us off.
Thank you so much, Raul. We're going to get started in just a minute. It looks like we've still got some participants joining. If you trickled in a little bit late, welcome again to today's webinar on preparing for hunting season at UPS. Raul just sort of introduced us and got us kicked off. But during peak season, the company is really focused on getting packages delivered, and management tends to sort of look the other way and let things slide. But every year when the volume drops after peak, it's hunting season. That means the company is laying people off, doing observations, following people around, doing OJS rides, issuing warning letters on petty stuff like methods, and watching drivers on the computer. They're looking for any reason to put members in the street or start a chain of discipline. The company's strategy isn't random. It's a corporate strategy to use anxiety and fear to increase profits by getting people to move faster. The strategy is called management by stress. The union has a strategy too of informing and uniting members to take on hunting season. We can do this by protecting and informing each other to get ahead of management write-ups, fighting unfair discipline, and going on the offense to turn the tables on management. Like we said before, none of this is random. There are fewer labor managers than business agents, which means every labor manager covers multiple areas, management networks, and shares strategies. And we need to do the same. So I'm going to pass it back to Raul to say a word on that and to take us through the agenda. Raul, I think you're muted.
Keeps meeting. There. Thank you. This is what TDU is all about. We started UPS Teamsters United to share information, spread effective strategies, and build a strong union from the bottom up. I am proud to be on the TDU steering committee because this is something that's very important. We need to understand is the way we get our union stronger is to basically educate and give the tools to everyone in the rank and file, not just stewards and not just business agents. So if you like what you see in today's webinar, we encourage you to stay involved and become a TDU member. We'll have more on that later. Now, part of today's agenda is in this webinar, what we'll be talking about is manager's flavor of the month. Basically, that'll be a typical subject that the management will be, basically focusing on on the rank and file, protecting ourselves with the methods, fighting unfair discipline, turning the tables on management, resources, and contract enforcement materials. We'll be open up for Q&A, and then you could use the button on the bottom of your screen to put a question on the queue.
Great. Thanks, Raul.
No problem.
As Raul said, at the very end of the webinar, we'll have time for Q&A. Everyone can find that button on the bottom of their screen. You can click that, enter a question for us. We'll try to get those either answered during the webinar or at the end. My name is Willem Morris. I'm an organizer for TDU. There are about 1,000 people on this call, but I think I know at least half of you guys. It's good to be here today to talk about hunting season. Right now, to get us started, people are already talking in the chat, but every year at UPS around this time of after peak, the company will pick a couple different methods or areas to focus on to try to harass and discipline members. This might be attendance, this might be uniform policy, but everyone take a second in the chat and let us know what's the flavor of the month in your area. What's UPS trying to harass you guys on right now? Okay, I'm seeing a lot of attendance, seeing some uniform attendance from a majority of the people. No scans, shoes, stacking out grievances, attendance. I'll take just a second to let these filter in, and we're hopefully going to touch on quite a few of these today during the call. Okay, I'm seeing cameras, attendance, tardiness. And while people continue to enter these into the chat, the first part of this webinar is going to be talking about union strategy for defense. We're going to talk about getting in front of these tactics for management of trying to harass and discipline us. There are two ways we can do this. We can go on defense and we can go on offense. But the very first way to take on hunting season is to avoid getting in trouble in the first place. And so the first thing we're going to talk about is following the methods at UPS. There are 340 methods at UPS. So we're not going to hit on each of them, but we've collected methods from different members across the country to try to have a list for you guys of what the most important methods are to follow at UPS to stay out of trouble. But we're not here just to be junior partners for management and be lecturing our fellow union members about how to stay out of trouble. We also can go on the offense at UPS. UPS around this time of year starts obsessing about the methods and harassment and discipline, and they're trying to speed you up and they're trying to make you feel stressed so that you work faster and you deliver more packages for the company. But in addition to following the methods correctly to stay out of discipline, we can also follow the methods as a way to kind of fight back against the company and say, okay, you want to speed me up, I'm actually going to follow the methods to the best of my ability so that I can stay safe and work at a sustainable pace that will get me through 30 years at UPS. So in order to talk more in depth about the methods, we have two shop stewards on today. Our first steward is going to be Basil Darling out of local 804 in New York. Basil, are you here with us?
Yes, I am.
All right, Basil, what are some of the most important methods for drivers to follow at UPS to stay out of discipline?
Well, we have a few methods. One of them would be not taking shortcuts. Management many times wants us to speed up, run, and they'll look the other way. But when it's time for discipline, they'll remember when you take those shortcuts. Another time would be correctly recording your time or your lunches, your breaks, and we don't want to take shortcuts. Don't interrupt your lunch or your break for them because they'll never remember that. They always want you to do favors. We don't do favors. You want to also practice doing your job the same way every day, not just when the supervisor is watching. At UPS, we develop a lot of habits, some bad, but you want to develop the good habits and be more consistent. And the more consistent you are, the more you're going to practice that behavior throughout your career and work safe. You want to record your packages accurately at your stops. These tactics that they want you to do something in the elevator or on the way back to the truck, all these shortcuts, again, it helps speed you up. If you follow the methods, it'll give you the time to do your job and you'll work properly and you won't make more mistakes. And then you want to work at a reasonable pace. You want to sustain yourself for years to come. And just like we all know, we're here for a career. And when we retire, we want to be able to physically enjoy that career. So you want to continue to try to work at a reasonable pace. And another method that they'll use all the time, and as a driver, I know it's a pain in the ass, you want to maintain the 3 points of contact, exiting and entering the vehicle. All the body mechanics that we do every day, you want to be able to ensure you're not putting stress on your body, but at the same time, you don't give them the low-hanging fruit to want to bring you in the office for discipline. And tell the truth. If you're having an issue with service or packages out there, relay the messages, communicate. Obviously, always reach out to a steward if you're unsure. And these are the tactics we can try to help members stay out the office.
Great.
Well,
Thanks, Basil. And Basil, when you notice as a steward that the company is starting to harass or hit on a certain method, trying to go after people for a certain thing, how do you communicate this to your members? What's your advice for other stewards about how to keep members out of the office?
well, obviously, I know about each one, teach one. and we can have a lot of one-on-one conversations, but then we can also have parking lot meetings at our barns or out in the break area to help inform and educate our members so we can prevent going into the office.
Great. Thank you, Basil. Next up, we have Carlos Silva, a TDU member and a shop steward out of Gardena, California, local 572. Carlos, you're an insider at UPS. What are some of the methods that are important for insiders this time of year?
How you doing, everybody? Some of the methods that work well for the insider people, preload, twilight. You got to make sure that you're working safe at a good pace. You want to use hands to surface. You want to use the lowering and lifting to make sure that you're grabbing the package correctly and you're not breaking your back, you're not damaging your back. You also want to use the proper footwear. You know, it's important. You don't want to walk in there with, you know, damaged shoes that you might create if you step on something, you might fall or something like that. You want to use the tools and equipment that UPS provides for you. And at least in my building, we use a lot of belts. You want to make sure that you conveyor and securing properly when you're going to walk on a belt or when you're going to retrieve a package or break a jam. And like I said, you always want to work safe, and you always want to tell management that you're doing the best you can if they're trying to make you work faster.
Great. Thanks, Carlos. And do you have anything to add on to what Basil was saying about how to inform your members of the best practices at UPS?
Yeah, you know, I mean, he touched pretty much on the basis, right? It's a member-to-member parking lot meetings. We have it at the park, flyers, leaflets. But the best way is member-to-member. You always want to have that communication with the member to let them know and explain the methods and explain the way that they have to work in order to get management off their back. So member-to-member is what we practically use over here in Gardena 572.
Yeah, and it shows the results. You know, I'm a TDU organizer and we have these webinars once a month. There's about 1,000 people on this webinar. But another great way to keep your members informed is to invite them to this TD material. Carlos is one of the best at this at the country. You got dozens of members coming from his building to every one of these webinars, and it shows what you can do as a strong steward and leader to keep your building informed. So thanks for being here with us today, Carlos.
Thank you.
The next thing we're going to talk about is fighting unfair discipline. The goal is to stay out of the office at UPS, but everyone knows that sometimes it's going to be inevitable. So we have Greg Kerwood out of Local 25 today, talk about how to defend your members from discipline and best practices in the office. So Greg, if you are preparing to go into the office with a member, what are some tips you're going to talk to them about best practices inside the office?
Well, as a steward, you want to advise people to remain calm above all else. If they're alone before you show up, you want to make sure all your members know that they should ask for a steward in any situation where they're being spoken to by management. If they feel it could lead to discipline, which is generally every conversation with management. You have a right to the steward you want. Don't let management pick their favorite steward if there is one, as long as that steward is available. Then your steward has the right to make sure they know what the topic of the meeting is. And management has an obligation to give them that, or they can advise you not to answer questions. So your steward should have that information. Once they have that information, you want to make sure that your steward and yourself have a conversation prior to the meeting to find out your side of the story, what it is about, what if you know what management is referring to, etc. Then your steward can give you advice on how to approach it. And you want to make sure, as I think was said already, make sure you're honest and tell your steward the truth. Lying to your steward is not going to help you at all. Once you're in the office, you want to make sure you're writing everything down. Your steward should be writing everything down as well, keeping track of who said what to whom, and importantly, when. And you want to remain calm. As I said, the worst thing you can do in the office is blow up. That's management 101 is to push your buttons, try to get you angry, try to get you to say something you shouldn't say. try to get you to confess other sins, give you open-ended questions that can lead you down roads you don't want to go down. You want to keep your answers precise. You want to keep them short. And if you don't know, you want to say you don't know. Don't guess. Don't feel like you have to give an answer if you don't know. Don't feel like you have to expound upon your answers just to keep talking because you're nervous. Keep your cool, stay calm. And if they do give you the discipline, don't react to that with threats or harassment or anything like that. We have a process to fight the discipline, and that process will begin. But you got to get yourself out of the office without adding to the problem.
Great. Thank you, Greg. And I know that in this webinar, we're going through a lot of information, but as you could see next to Greg as he's speaking, we're releasing these toolkits on best practices for hunting season with flyers like the ones highlighted on the screen right now. So after the webinar, all of the information will be easily accessible to you and also to print out or text around to the members in your building. Greg, you talked about best practices for members in the office, but as a steward, do you have any advice for any other new or less experienced stewards for how to represent your member when you're in the office with them?
Yes. As a steward, you want to make sure you know your rights as a steward. There's a book by Robert Schwartz, The Legal Rights of Union Stewards. I recommend that highly. It's available on the tdu.org website. You have a right to know what the meeting's about. You want to make sure you talk to your member beforehand. You want to make sure you get their side of the story. You want to encourage them to be honest. If they did what they did, lying about it is not going to help. You want to make sure that you are protecting them in the office. If management is asking vague questions, you have a right to object to things that you think line or inappropriate. You also want to discuss with management prior, if you can. As we'll see, we get to just cause. Sometimes they will show their hand and announce discipline before they've done their interview, which is not okay. And you also want to reserve your right to caucus with the member at any point. If you feel that things are getting out of hand or the member's getting heated or whatever it is, just pause the meeting, say I need to caucus with my member, and get out. And the same goes for the member. I should have said, if your steward tells you to shut up, shut up. Don't keep on talking. Don't start getting angry. They're telling you that for a reason. In general, over talking is a bad idea in the office. Emotions can run high. So if your steward, gives you the sign or I flat out told people to shut up. It is in your best interest to stop talking.
Great. And Greg and I are going to move along to just cause, protecting members through just cause. TDU sells entire books on just cause. We do entire webinars on just cause. So we're only going to be able to hit on the basics in this meeting. But Greg, can you explain what is just cause and also the 7 tests to protect your members?
Yeah, just cause is basically sort of a set of rules of discipline that are there to protect you from unfairness on the part of management, make sure that everyone is treated the same. Before I get into it, I just want to say very quickly that just cause exists to protect you from arbitrary or retaliatory discipline. And due to management's laziness and incompetence, sometimes can also be used to save your job even when you're wrong. But it should not be viewed as a license to break the rules. The best way to avoid discipline is still to follow the policies and procedures. For instance, the best way to not have attendance discipline is to show up on time, ready to work. The best way to not have uniform discipline is to show up every day in uniform. But if management does go after these things, they're liable to screw it up. And that's where just cause can protect you. As you said, Willem, we're going to go through this very quickly. But if anybody's interested in getting deeper into it, which should be everybody on here, but definitely if you're a steward or BA, you want a copy of Robert Schwartz's book on just cause, also available at tdu.org. Can't recommend that highly enough. To get into the 7 principles of just cause, quickly, the first one is fair notice. You cannot be disciplined for violating a rule whose standard and penalties are unknown. For example, a favorite of management saying you failed to work in the best interest of the company. Well, that's vague. What does that mean? We don't know what that means. It's not precise. Any rules that are unknown to members, they don't know about, you can't be disciplined for a rule that you don't know about. A tip on that is that when you go in the office, management will try to lead the member into confessing knowledge about the rules. They'll ask an open-ended question. So do you know what the process is? Do you know what the procedure is for this? To try to get you to admit you know what the rules are, so then they can justify the discipline. Number 2 is prior enforcement. You cannot be disciplined for violating a rule that has been unenforced for a lengthy amount of time. Good examples are tardiness. If people are late every day and no one gets disciplined, they can't suddenly turn around and discipline people. Or uniforms. If they're not holding people to uniform standards, they can't turn around one day and hold people to uniform standards. A tip for that is to prove that there were prior violations by members or other people without discipline. But you have to be aware that the company can reset any policy they're not enforcing. So if they tell you starting next Monday, we're going to enforce the uniform standards and everybody needs to be in uniform, that is communicated clearly, that's a reset. And then they can discipline for something even though they haven't done it before. Number 3 is due process. The investigation must occur prior to discipline. Charges must be precise, and discipline cannot be increased once issued. As I said earlier, they can't decide ahead of time or pull the steward aside and say, yeah, we're going to suspend so-and-so today if they have not done their investigation yet. If they use a phrase, another popular phrase, failure to follow methods and procedures. Okay, well, that's not a precise charge. That doesn't tell you what you did incorrectly that prompted the discipline. And they also can't increase discipline. So if the member fit in the office and says something they shouldn't say, they can't turn around and say, well, we were giving you a warning letter, but now you're getting a suspension, right? They can't up the ante. The tip on that for stewards, especially, get information on the charges prior to the meeting so you know what you're going into, and take good notes on the sequence of events so you can have notes that say they told me ahead of time or told us ahead of time that this was going to be the discipline before they asked any questions. Number 4 is substantial proof. Charges have to be proven by substantial credible evidence. Examples, they say, well, we know you weren't sick yesterday. Well, they have no proof of that. There's no evidence of that. That's just speculation on their part. Or we were told by others that you were signing for packages. Again, that's hearsay. That's not something they can prove. Number 5 is equal treatment. I saw a couple questions about this already. Unless prior discipline exists, the same offense should result in the same punishment. So if I'm late and you're late and I get a warning letter and you get a suspension, that's not equal treatment, right? Or if they single certain people out for stronger discipline, which can happen sometimes with a steward. They'll say, oh, well, you're the steward, you need to lead by example, or you should know better. That's not okay. The tip with those, information requests are the key to that. You want to prove that other people receive different discipline for the same offense. And you also want to keep track of management violating those rules. If they're handing out warning letters for people, crossing a moving belt, and you have evidence of supervisors doing that continually, that will work in your favor. Number 6 is progressive discipline. Employee must be given at least one level of discipline that allows for improvement or correction of behavior. Example of that would obviously terminate you on your first offense. You want to remind management that the purpose of discipline, even though they forget it, is to change behavior, not harass people or fire them. But you have to be aware that there are exceptions to this, things that we can assume that everybody knows are wrong. Theft, destruction of property, possession of a firearm in the building, drug dealing, things of that nature. They do not have to give you one level of discipline before termination. And last but not least, mitigating and extenuating circumstances. That's to take into account circumstances that may cause or impact the behavior. So for example, was it intentional or was it a mistake? Did you just screw up or did you do it on purpose? Arbitrators can look at your past record. If you have a clean record for a long period of time, that works in your favor. If you did do something wrong and you took responsibility for that immediately, as I said, tell the truth. You want to do that ASAP. And were you given poor instructions? Was your training lacking? Any of those things are circumstances that may change the discipline or the justified discipline for whatever happened. And the tip with that is if you are the member, or if you're a steward and you know that the member did what they did, encourage them to take responsibility for what they did. So if they failed to report an accident, you want to have them say, listen, I know I failed to report it. I screwed up. I apologize. It was my mistake. Won't happen again. Or if there are extenuating circumstances, I know I called that supervisor, whatever, but I just got some bad news, from home, and I was really upset. Things like that. You want to get out in the open and get them out in the open immediately so that it doesn't look like it was something that was cooked up later on. And those are the 7 principles of just cause.
Great, Greg. Thank you so much. And as we said before, we know this is a lot of information to go through in half an hour. In the last 30 minutes, we've covered the most important methods, not just to stay out of trouble, but to keep yourself safe and sustainable for the long run at UPS. This time of year, management is trying to speed us up. As TDU members, we're trying to stress the importance of being united. We want to be following these methods right now to get ahead of OJS so that we're doing the same thing every day so the company can't get after us. We have a copy of a flyer that has the most important methods that we'll send out to everyone that you can use to inform and educate members in your building. Next up was best practices in the office. We talked about best practices as a member and as a steward representing your members. We have another flyer going out in this hunting season toolkit about best practices in the office. And then finally, the 7 tests of just cause. Our last flyer in the toolkit is a steward's guide to how to use just cause to protect your member. Thank you all of the speakers for helping out with this. And if you have any questions on this kind of stuff before I pass it on to Beth, you can enter your questions in the Q&A function of the chat. Thanks, everyone.
So I think there's one more tip in here that I think Greg kind of touched on it, and Greg, you can chime back in if you like. But a way that members can often get caught in a trap in the office is, like Greg said, if the company is asking you a question, it's because they already know the answer. The company likes to use technology to try and trip people up and say more than they need to. So Greg, I saw you unmuted yourself. I don't know if you want to chime in here.
I was going to say what you just said, but yeah, it's the name of that game with them is to get you to lie. So even though they can't discipline you directly from the technology, if they have evidence that you're doing something, they will ask you whether or not you did it, and then use the technology to prove that you're lying, and then it turns into a dishonesty issue and not a technology issue. So be aware that if management is asking you questions about things, they already have the answers. They know what they are, and they're trying to get you to say something. So think very careful about your answers, and don't be afraid to take the time to pause, to think, to ask for a caucus with your steward at any point. There's no, they like to shine the light on your face and ask you where you were on the night of the 27th or whatever. You have more rights that you can use. You can ask for that pause. You can take your time, or you can simply say, I don't know, I don't recall, I don't remember exactly, and leave it at that.
Thanks so much, Greg. So we're going to shift gears a little bit and start talking. We're going to hear from a few stewards on going on the offensive, because our best defense is a good offense. Management needs to see that when they try to play divide and conquer, we can unite and stick together. This is exactly what others have talked about, showing the company that members know that they're not isolated. People see that you can have each other's backs. Your stewards can have your back. And members can stick together and be stronger as a group than one by one. It looks like David Levine, the TDU staff director, wants to jump in here.
No, thanks.
Okay, sorry, the hand up. We're going to hear from a few stewards. First up, we're going to hear from Ben Reynolds. He's a package car steward out of Kansas City, Local 41. And he's going to share some tips on having effective parking lot meetings and how picking the issues, picking on the flavor of the month and being aware of the flavor of the month can inform your parking lot meetings and make them even more useful in uniting and sticking together. Ben?
Hi, thanks, Beth. Yeah, so planning a parking lot meeting, I kind of want to go over first before getting into the substance of it. Having a successful parking lot meeting requires a lot of planning out in front. And so if you're a steward like myself, you hopefully already have your work area's contact information, right? Phone list, emails, so forth. If you are wanting to plan a parking lot meeting and don't have that, your steward's a great person to get it from. You and other active members are going to want to split up that phone tree because you're probably going to have a lot of phone numbers. You know, I have about 75 people in my center, for example. So split all that up, plan out about a week ahead of time. Half hour before work, I would say is usually a good amount of time. You want to keep the meetings short because everyone knows the people that need the information the most are usually the ones that are like in the biggest hurry and are going to be worried about getting into work. So generally speaking, you're going to want to make flyers beforehand to pass out with, you know, sort of the broad strokes of what you're going over. So for example, in the middle of peak, we decided to plan a parking lot meeting on a reasonably warm day here in Kansas City to get out in front of the end of peak season, which is what we're all here talking about now, right? To talk about the new contract language about 9.5 and OGS rides and the company being required to give 24 hours notice before giving you an OJS ride. So at the meeting, like I said, you're going to want to keep it short and sweet. Just highlight those changes in this case is what we did, and leave room for questions because, you know, we really are trying to engage the membership and have more of an open dialogue with them and encourage them to speak up and speak their mind as well. We're not just trying to order people around. That's what management does.
Thank you so much, Ben. So some of the things that stuck out to me were like building a phone tree. Just the act of building a phone tree is going to show members that they're not alone. The company really likes for people to feel isolated. When you get people together as a group and you hear from a steward or an active member who's wanting to enforce the contract, this is what's happening and this is what's happening to everyone. It's harder for the company to isolate people and divide people. And enforcing your rights together is less scary than doing it alone. So Ben, I have one question for you. How do you try and get ahead of, I know the parking lot meeting you had before peak ended was focused on some of the key changes in the contract that were especially relevant now. But what are other tips you have for getting ahead of the flavor of the month and proactively planning parking lot meetings or about those subjects?
Yeah, so I mean the quickest and simplest way is to just, you know, always attend your daily PCM, right? Because they're going to telegraph a lot of this stuff sort of in passing at PCM. Another thing that and this is going to be a little more specific to your situation, but like here, you know, here in my building, for example, everything sort of runs through the division manager because his office is directly above our center. So, you know, we from time to time stop by and have, you know, some unpleasant conversations with him, but he, you know, you can get information from management like that ahead of time sometimes, because they like to hear themselves talk.
And as a steward, you might maybe notice the company's writing people up for this and that. When
Yeah.
you notice those kinds of things along with PCM, you know, the topics that come up in PCM, it signals to you, okay, this is what management's coming for. This way you can be getting ahead, talking to members about those issues, those methods, or whatever the case may be. So they're not surprised. So people don't feel caught off guard and people don't feel like the company's always out ahead.
Yeah,
We're always
absolutely.
behind. So I think our next speaker is going to be Mike Kuntz. He's a shop steward in Local 135 in Indiana, and he's going to talk a little bit about a Supervisors Working enforcement campaign. Take it away, Mike.
Thank you, Beth. Hello, brothers and sisters. Hope everybody's well. So like she said, it's hunting season, but that means it's hunting season for us too, right? So one of the ways that we're combating management by stress in Indianapolis is aggressive enforcement of supervisors working, which is Article 3, Section 7. When supervisors do our work, it takes money out of our pocket, and it also affects a lot of other things, right? Like it affects their ability to lay off, And in our center particularly, we noticed that it goes into the low staffing on the preload and how it affects our wrap up as drivers every morning. So the more work they do, the worse for us. We don't like that. We made a plan, me and my business agent and fellow stewards, to walk around the building and write up every single name of supervisors that we saw working to file a grievance on. Visible contract enforcement, it's a super good way to boost morale. When the members see us out and doing this stuff, it lets them know that, oh, hey, we can do this too. And also, we're not alone. We've got people that are doing this for us. And that means they can kind of follow suit. We, in our center particularly, and I'm sure that you guys have it as well, we've got members who come in early and they're loading their trucks every day regardless. So my idea was forming sort of like a goon squad, consistent enforcement of watching these supervisors working, getting names written down, times, all this other good stuff. While we were at it, we also filed on name tags, Article 20, Section 5. It's a super good way to keep management on their toes, because if they want to be petty, we can too. If they want to hold us accountable to uniforms, they want to hold us accountable to methods, that's one good way to just consistently stay on them and make sure that they're doing what they have to do as well. The name tag language is a nuisance to management, and when they start trying to bully us, that just means that we can kind of do the same thing. It's like I said, it's hunting season for us as well. UPS Teamsters United has a new toolkit for enforcing supervisors working. When we get paid to make sure that all our affected members, they're going to get a piece of the pie, that just continues to build our solidarity and our unity and member enforcement of our contract, because we don't have a good contract unless we enforce it.
Thank you so much, Mike. So some key takeaways there. Visible contract enforcement is important, showing members that, you know, people are looking for ways to enforce the contract, and showing members they don't have to be afraid to file a grievance. So looking for the people who are already interested and already seem to have an appetite to do something. That, like Mike was saying, the people who he knows come in early. He's got plans to try and recruit them to his goon squad to keep management on their toes. And then the thing about the name tags, like, there's a constant push and pull at UPS between the members and management, where there's always a give and a take and attention. So, like he said, if the company wants to be petty about your socks and starts writing people up over hoodies and stuff like that, you can put it back on them and file on their own uniform policy. That's language in the contract that every supervisor, every manager has to be wearing a name tag. So there's the toolkit, like Willem said earlier, we're going to have a toolkit with some of the tools we've discussed earlier on methods and just cause. There's an additional toolkit on supervisors working. You're also going to be getting a form after this webinar wraps up, with a link to get involved. You can share your concerns, let us know what you want, what tools you want to try and use in your building to enforce the contract. And I think I want to remind everybody, there's a button at the bottom of your screen. It looks like we're getting plenty of questions in the Q&A. And we're going to try and get to as many as we can before we run out of time. If you like this webinar, stay tuned for more. We're going to be doing webinars in the coming months on more of a deep dive on enforcing supervisors working and building a campaign that involves everyone. And like Mike said, the important part is making sure that everybody shares the victory too. When you win penalty pay, you want to make sure that everybody's getting a taste, whether that's a pizza party in the parking lot or the break room, or a union button for everybody to wear it together to work. So on supervisors working, on OJS rides, on SurePost, and more topics to come. Like Willem said, we've been doing these monthly, and we're going to try and continue in the coming months. So keep your eyes open for those. I'm going to turn it back over to Raul for a minute, and then we're going to start taking some questions.
Thanks. Just a reminder for everybody, if you like the information and resources provided on this webinar, consider becoming a dues-paying member of TDU. As I said earlier, I joined TDU is because of the educational, and nothing management fears more than educated members. It makes it harder for them to bully the members if we're all informed and we know our rights and we know how to come back to them. So None of this would be possible without members joining TDU. So now I'm going to turn this back over to Beth to take some questions.
So maybe Ben or Mike or Greg, if one of you wants to jump in and take those questions. What do we do about the company putting all discipline under failure to follow? And how can we dispute warning letters for not following methods on OJS rides?
So every warning letter should be disputed without question. I know in New England, it's now automatic. We don't even have to send it. Everything is automatically disputed. But as far as your argument goes, the purpose of an OJS, according to the company, is to review your performance and how you do the job and how you follow the methods, and to improve and point out things that you may be doing wrong so it can be better. That's why the OJS was supposed to be 3 days. If management chooses not to use it for that purpose, to me, that turns immediately into harassment. I mean, you're over supervising somebody. If you're riding with them all day to look for the things they're doing wrong so you can discipline them, that is absolutely harassment. And I would file that under Article 37, and I would add in the penalty pay, which is, you know, up to 5 days pay now, because there's nothing this company understands better than a financial penalty. You know, if they don't follow the rules on these rides, as far as the 24 hours notice, the reason for the ride, and then want to issue discipline from it, to me, that's absolutely harassment. And that's the way we fight back on that.
Thanks so much, Greg. Does anybody else have anything to add before we move to another question?
Yeah, as far as the company trying to, I mean, Greg touched on this earlier, but as far as the company trying to be vague and lumping things together just as like methods violations, you know, for example, in the Central Region Supplement, we have new language because this was an issue where things were just getting lumped under dishonesty under 17A for us, right? And now we have explicit language that says that failure to follow methods shall not alone be considered dishonesty. But I would say like taking notes in the office is also really helpful. You know, I got pulled into the office the other day and my other steward and I both are documenting the entire conversation because it starts out by me being told that I'm in the office because I had the highest over allowed in the center yesterday, right? Like I mean, they're just admitting that it's production harassment from the get-go. So you just want to have notes on that, you know, the nature of the conversation and stuff to refer back to.
Much. So I think you guys are going to get a text in just a minute about with the link to that form, the form to take action. So we've got all of these toolkits available online. You'll be getting a text and an email also about those toolkits. We want to hear from members about what action you want to take at your building to enforce the contract. And if you want to try and organize a meeting in your area. If you want to try and have a small Zoom meeting with members from surrounding locals or members from your region. So keep your eyes open for that message. For people who have a question, if we don't get to your question, you can also include it there. The form will also ask if you're interested in becoming a TDU member. Like Raul said before, none of this is possible without dues paying TDU members, and we welcome you to consider joining today. So let's move on to our next question. How can we get management to stop putting ear eggs on belts? Let's see if Carlos or others want to answer that one.
Well, about e-rigs, right? Obviously, e-rigs, you know, is anything over 70 pounds, or maybe according to UPS is maybe over 130 pounds nowadays. But, you know, obviously you don't want to be on the belt. You don't put them on the belt. You can break your back, you picking them off. If you want to stop management from doing that or the employees from doing it, all you got to do is stop the belt, convert securing. You know, push that button, make sure that everybody is well known that there's an e-rake on the belt, make sure that whoever needs to take it off needs to take it off. You have to file a grievance if they continue doing the same thing over and over, and just grab the management attention in regards of not to do it. It's not safe. And it just creates just slow production at UPS. So file a grievance, convert securing, and just keep working safe.
So always comes back to working safe. And Carlos, is this something that you think might be an issue you can get other members involved with rather than trying to enforce it alone?
I mean, obviously, you know, most of the UPS issues, you can always get all the members, you know, aboard to you know, to just create just anything against UPS. So definitely, we can always round out the members to get together and just file a grievance.
Perfect. So group grievances are a good way to combat issues that are widely felt across the building, and that a lot of people care about, like ear eggs on the belt, because it makes their job harder and it makes their day longer. A few members have asked, when will the new contract be available? Great question. It's available on the UPS app, on the Teamster website, and on the TDU website. The International is currently working on getting contracts printed and out to the locals, and we hope to hear more on the timeline soon. In the meantime, you can always have the PDF on your phone, so it's with you everywhere you go and doesn't take up more space than you already have in your pocket. Another question, are union stewards allowed to take pictures during work to prove contract violations such as egress issues? Carlos or Greg, any of you want to take this question?
Absolutely. Any safety issue can be documented by photographs under the Whole Foods decision. Do it all the time, especially with this bulk language and the stuff coming down the belts. That is absolutely your weapon of choice to document the fact that those, you know, the word commingling has been a universal word at this point. What does commingling mean? If those packages are on the belt with regular packages, that is commingling. And if you can take a picture that shows that, and have multiple pictures showing it's a repeated issue, that is going to work in your favor. So yes, absolutely. Not just stewards, members as well can take those pictures. If it's a safety issue, you absolutely have a right to document.
Thank you so much. Anybody have anything to add on that? It's a pretty thorough answer. All right. Miracle asks, will we email and post these online for everyone after the webinar? Sorry, she asks, where can we find all the UPS methods so we know what to follow? So it's been mentioned a few times, there are 340 methods. Not so easy to remember all of them off the top of your head. You will be getting a text with a link after this webinar is over. One of the toolkits that's on that link, the hunting season toolkit, includes a number of materials, and one of the links included there is the link, the entire methods. So you will get that. You'll also see there's a pass out in there, like Willem mentioned, that you can share with your coworkers. You can save it on your phone. You can print out copies with some of the key methods to watch out for and to follow routinely. We have some questions about hourly guarantees. How do we make sure we get our 3.5 hours inside? Management is bringing in more people on our shifts to try to get people out. Who wants to take that question? I keep picking on Carlos. Anybody else?
I say something. Look, so just file a grievance. You know, there's grievance on seniority. You know, if somebody's double shifting, you know, just file the grievance. If they're coming from the twilight to the preload, you want to make sure that the preloaders are actually getting that work. You know, they're entitled to that work. So you want to file a grievance on it. That's the key to do what you need to do.
Anybody have anything to add on that one?
I do.
Guarantee?
If you, that's a grievance that you definitely want to file as all affected, to get everybody involved and get everybody paid. And it's also important, I don't think we've mentioned it too much here, information requests. That's a prime candidate for an information request. Once you file that grievance, you have a right to request time cards, and you can literally calculate who has worked under 3.5 and not gotten their guarantee, and come up with a number, that only demonstrates how strong your case is. If you have, hundreds of members losing their guarantee every day, that's going to add up to a giant penalty. So that's an important tool to use in many of these issues, is filing those information requests to get it.
That's right. Thank you so much, Carlos and Greg. We're going to take just a couple more questions. Garrett from Local 71 asks, what's a good strategy to handle management when they start harassing you in the morning before start time about your overload? They ask open-ended questions. What's going on out there? When you try to explain things that slowed you down, they just want to argue and say that it. Okay, so you guys get the idea. This is kind of a packed question. It's got a lot of stuff in there. So who wants to take this question? What's a good strategy to handle
I want
management?
to take that. Can I take
Okay.
that question? I want to take that question.
Yes.
First of all, first thing you say to management when they start to talk to you is, are you asking me to get on the clock? And when they say no, you walk away, period. Don't explain yourself. Don't answer any of that stuff. And before you answer any of those questions, when you are on the clock, your first statement should be, I want my steward. And if they don't get you a steward, the conversation's over. If they continue, you file a labor charge. This is UPS world. It's upside down land. It may seem impolite and rude or whatever to not talk to somebody when they talk to you, or to not answer questions when you're asked them, but it's for your own protection. And you have to get your brain into UPS mode to make it through with this company.
So Ben, is this the kind of thing that might be a good topic for a parking lot meeting, or for just going around to people one-on-one?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, the subject, I mean, I'm always looking for ways to sort of like tie all of the issues going on any given day together, right? So like if we're talking about management going around harassing people about their overload, I mean, the first thing I'm thinking about is that, we've got 25 people in my building on layoff next week, drivers, right? And so like I'm turning that around on management when I'm talking to people. We're talking about making sure we're filing 9/5. You got any 8-hour day requests left? Like use them, right? It's almost the end of the month. We get 3 in the central here. Use all 3. You need to be controlling your dispatch. And the numbers are all made up. They don't mean anything. I mean, I get told all the time, well, you got a 6-hour day today. I'm like, what does that mean? Right? Like that's ridiculous. How, like, you can see the future. That's pretty impressive. So yeah, I'm just looking for ways to tie all of this together more comprehensively, getting people to try to look at the big picture here of what's going on.
And when people are getting approached if management's approaching you when you're off the clock, more than likely they're doing it to other people too. And when people think that they're the only one it's happening to, it's scary to say, I'm not on the clock. If you want to talk to me, you better pay me. But if other people are doing that too, and if there's a parking lot meeting or a conversation with a group of drivers from the same center saying, look, we can't let the company start us working before we're getting paid to work. There's a time and a place for those kinds of conversations. They're asking people all kinds of questions. We're going to walk in together, and we're going to kind of talk to the hand to the company. I think we have time for a couple more. How would I defend partially stacking out bulk in the narrowest area of the building where the building ends and nobody's walking out there until the end of the preload shift? Is it safer for me to have part of it outside the truck until the end rather than have to lift everything outside of my power zone while walking in sideways because I can no longer fit in the truck?
So stacking, right? Yeah, you never want to stack. The company always tells you not to stack. It's you want egress, right? You wanna you wanna maintain that egress, so if there's an emergency, you can roll out of the building safely. So it obviously, you always talk about flavor of the month. You only allow to stack during the heaviest time because it works out for UPS. But you don't want to stack. If you have to, because you have a bulk, you want to create some type of system, maybe to put it inside the truck, in the corner, in the rear, maybe leave some of the packages. In my building, we have cages. maybe leave some of the packages inside the cages and let them go by. Or if you do actually have to stack them on the side of the truck and you don't want to pick them up by yourself by using the power zone, just make sure you communicate to management that you actually need help. You need somebody to come and help you with that bulk and communicate that there is a bulk coming. So what do you need to do with it? And if they're harassing you or whatnot, you can always file a grievance, safety grievance, or you can actually go to the safety committee. I know most of the safety committee are a bunch of kiss asses, I understand, but you have to follow the steps in order to make your grievance a little bit stronger. So just work safe, work as directed, and just create that plan so the bulk or stacking doesn't get on your way.
Thanks so much, Carlos. We're going to take one more question, but before we do, just wanted to remind everybody, if you are interested in joining TDU, we welcome you to join and become a dues paying member. These webinars and all of these toolkits and resources aren't possible without TDU. At the beginning of the call, Raul talked about how important it is to have a network. The company's really well networked. They share strategies really well. We need to do the same, and that's what TDU is about, and that's what UPS Teamsters United is all about. So consider joining. You're going to be getting that form by text that asks what kind of action are you interested in taking? Are you interested in holding an organizing meeting in your area, using any of these toolkits for contract enforcement where you work? Keep your eyes peeled for it. If you had a question that we didn't have time for and we didn't get to today, there's a good place to put your question and have an organizer get in touch. And there's a text on its way out to you also with all of these toolkits that we keep talking about and referring to. So one last question before we go. A driver asks, will UPS be going back to the code 06 guaranteed 8-hour pay instead of code 05 for hours worked? The dispatcher makes us too light and that is their fault.
I'll take that one. Nobody should be coded 05 ever. You have a guarantee, demand your guarantee. If you don't have enough work, send a message before you come back to the building. I'm all done. What else do you have for me? Get a commitment from management on the dyad. You have a right to the messages on the dyad that states that they are willing to pay your guarantee. If they tell you to go home and not pay your guarantee, you file a grievance that you were directed to go home, that there was no work, and you did not get your guarantee. It's not something that management can change at their whim. Your guarantee is part of your contract. Everybody should be demanding it every single day.
Thanks, Greg. And just to hammer home this get involved for one more time, a lot of people that you heard speaking on the call today got involved with TDU in the past year through these webinars. Beth and I are both organizers at TDU. What we're here for is to help make your union stronger in your area. So Ben does parking lot meetings, and I, for the first couple of parking lot meetings I did, help them come up with content, help them come up with flyers. If you're interested in doing any of this kind of stuff, but it sounds great, but you're not sure how to get started, that's where we're here for. We can either answer your questions directly or connect you with other stewards in your area. Take advantage of this opportunity. This is how you make the union stronger.